This is Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com. Something a little different for this particular commentary. We haven't heard much about this. I warn you, this is not for weak people and small children, and keep the horses in the barn so they don't get spooked. The latest information that we have here from NASA is that they are actually announcing the development of a new defensive measure against solar flares. It's going to be called the Solar Shield. Why do we want a solar shield against flares, sunstorms, in other words, that release electrically charged particles and shoot them in the direction of Earth? Because those solar flares can do a great deal of damage. And the estimates are that sensitive electronic components in satellites and the power grids further down here on Earth can be severely damaged. You can have transformers blow up, the melting of other components in the power grid. And the problem is, and this is supposed to happen somewhere around 2012, 2013. Yes, and it is a scientific prediction. It is not just the Mayan calendar on which the movie 2012 was based, although the Mayan calendar is very accurate because they did study the planets very carefully. It's based on a cycle of flares that occur on the sun, and every so many years one of them is a super flare that really sends out a lot of material. What NASA is trying to do is to predict when that flare will happen and to have basically an alert system ready so that when it happens, they can notify immediately a whole network of power grid managers who can then shut down parts of the electrical grid in order to prevent the surge from actually going to a live power grid and destroying a lot of this equipment. Worst case scenarios are not very pretty for this. That if it really happens, you could have massive damage that would take between 4 and 10 years to fix. You could have the first year of the repair job a bill of something like $2 trillion in order to replace all of this. And the bad news is also that even if you've got the money, the time, the will, and can do it, there is a huge shortage of transformers. We're about backlogged right now, 2 years for transformers. The Chinese are among the few countries in the world that produce them, and many of the transformers that are the key to the American power grid are not off the shelf. I call them Walmart transformers. They are custom made for specific power grid management, and so they would have to be manufactured from scratch. This is something that you can follow by going on the web and simply look for NASA and solar shields, and you'll be able to inform yourself about it and understand that this is something scientific, something interesting, something that we are not discussing much because obviously it could produce panic if people think that this is going to be another Y2K. Do you remember Y2K, the year 2000, when the clocks on all the computers turned over and the last digits all of a sudden were no longer numbers but were zeros, and it was going to crash the entire computer systems of the world? As it turns out, of course, the prediction on that was inaccurate. It did cause a lot of pain and cost a lot of money to upgrade a lot of the computer systems, but nothing bad happened. A few of them crashed. Hopefully this is also fair warning and early warning, and in the end the flares hopefully are not going to be as bad as we think. One of the things that concerns me is that our satellites, on which we depend tremendously, including for the use of my iPad and the internet, those satellites are not very well protected, and there is great concern that these solar flares could do serious damage to our satellite system. That would knock out potentially GPS. You think GPS is useful for you to drive somewhere and find an obscure address, or for you to find a restaurant on your smart device. GPS drives almost everything in this country, including the entire supply chain, dispatchers, the United States Air Force, almost every military operation, law enforcement, ambulances, hospital hospital employees and first responders all use GPS. And so if that were to happen, it would really be a serious challenge for us to function as a post-industrial society. Thought I'd cheer you up for Thanksgiving with this one. Stefan Schmidt for InsiderIowa.com.